When Julia Roberts turned 57, it wasn't just another birthday for Hollywood's brightest smile. It became a moment to pause, to look back at the kind of career that most actors only dream of, and to reflect on the bonds and friendships that shaped her along the way. Among all the stories and names that fill her decades-long journey, one connection stands out with a glow that never seems to fade: her partnership with Richard Gere. Together, these two stars didn't just make movies. They created cultural touchstones. They gave audiences a modern fairy tale in Pretty Woman, and reunited years later in Runaway Bride, proving that their chemistry was more than lightning in a bottle. It was timeless. But the question that still lingers is, what really happened between Julia Roberts and Richard Gere behind the scenes? It's easy to assume that their closeness on screen must have spilled over into real life. After all, the way Julia laughed at Gere's impromptu necklace box trick, or the way he looked at her with a mix of charm and quiet admiration, felt too natural to be scripted. But behind those scenes was something even more powerful than romance. It was trust, respect, and a rare kind of friendship. Roberts was barely in her 20s when she stepped into the role that would change her life, and Gere was already a seasoned Hollywood leading man. Instead of being intimidated, she found in him an anchor, someone who not only matched her energy, but gave her the confidence to shine brighter than ever. Their bond went far beyond the lights and cameras. On set, they laughed, improvised, and shared a rhythm that no director could have manufactured. When Julia once described Gere as her knight in shining armor, it wasn't just a line to please fans. It was her way of acknowledging how safe and supported she felt while working with him. For Gere, Julia brought something just as valuable: honesty, playfulness, and the kind of authenticity that elevated every scene. It was this mutual admiration that transformed what could have been just another Hollywood love story into something unforgettable. This video will take you into that story. It will trace how Julia Roberts rose from small-town beginnings to become America's sweetheart, how Richard Gere became the embodiment of Hollywood's gentleman, and how the two of them came together to define an era of romantic cinema. You'll discover how their partnership was formed, what went on behind the scenes of their most famous films, and what Julia has revealed about that time in her life now that she's 57. By the end, you'll see their journey not just as co-stars, but as two people whose connection left an indelible mark on Hollywood and on the hearts of millions. Julia Fiona Roberts was born on October 28, 1967, in Smyrna, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta, into a family where creativity and acting were already in the air. Her parents, Betty Lou Berdemus and Walter Grady Roberts, had both been actors and co-founded a children's acting school in Decatur. Life wasn't easy for the Roberts family. Money was often tight, and Julia's childhood was marked by challenges. When her parents divorced, she was still very young, and her father passed away not long after. These early experiences gave Julia a resilience and empathy that would later shine through in the characters she portrayed on screen. While her older brother Eric Roberts pursued acting and found early success, Julia initially had different dreams. She once thought about becoming a veterinarian because of her love for animals. Yet, fate had other plans, and soon enough, her path would lead her straight to Hollywood. Her start in the film industry wasn't instant stardom. Julia made small appearances in television and film during the mid-1980s, including a role in the series Crime Story and in the 1988 film Satisfaction. It was her breakout role in Mystic Pizza, 1988. However, that first revealed her magnetic screen presence to a wider audience. Playing Daisy Araujo, a working-class young woman navigating love and ambition, Roberts captured hearts with a mixture of fire, vulnerability, and authenticity. Critics began to notice her, not just for her looks, but for an emotional accessibility that felt genuine and relatable. Her momentum grew stronger the following year, with Steel Magnolias, 1989, where she played Shelby, a spirited young woman battling health challenges while determined to live her life fully. Surrounded by a powerhouse cast including Sally Field, Shirley MacLaine, and Dolly Parton, Julia more than held her own. Her performance earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, a rare feat for someone so early in their career. With that nomination, she was no longer just Eric Roberts' younger sister trying her luck in the industry. She was Julia Roberts, a rising star with something unique to offer. What set Julia apart was her everyday woman charm. She wasn't the traditional Hollywood beauty who seemed untouchable. Instead, her wide, luminous smile, expressive eyes, and down-to-earth presence made audiences feel like she could be their best friend, their neighbor, or the woman they secretly admired from afar. Directors and casting agents recognized this quality and leaned into it, casting her in roles that allowed her to balance strength with vulnerability. By the early 1990s, Julia Roberts had skyrocketed into superstardom. After Pretty Woman in 1990, which cemented her as America's sweetheart, she became one of the most sought-after actresses in the world. But even before that film's release, the groundwork had been laid through her earlier choices. She wasn't afraid to take on roles where her characters were flawed, relatable, and human, and audiences responded in kind. Her rise in the 1990s was nothing short of historic. Studio executives began to recognize that attaching Julia Roberts' name to a project almost guaranteed box office success. She became the highest-paid actress in Hollywood, commanding salaries that broke records for female performers at the time. Films like Sleeping with the Enemy, 1991, The Pelican Brief, 1993, and My Best Friend's Wedding, 1997, showcase her versatility, allowing her to move fluidly between thrillers, legal dramas, and romantic comedies, while always keeping her signature charm intact. What made Julia's success even more remarkable was her ability to sustain it. While many actors experience short-lived fame, she managed to remain relevant throughout the decade, largely because she never lost that balance between glamour and relatability. Her characters often represented women who were navigating real-world challenges, finding love, overcoming obstacles, or standing up for themselves, and Julia infused them with humor, warmth, and strength. By the end of the 1990s, Julia Roberts wasn't just an actress. She was a cultural icon. She had defined what it meant to be a leading lady in modern Hollywood, not through unattainable perfection, but through authenticity. From her modest beginnings in Georgia to her record-breaking salaries on the big screen, she had truly earned her title as America's sweetheart. And little did she know, her collaborations with Richard Gere would take that title and etch it into film history forever. Richard Tiffany Gere was born on August 31st, 1949, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and grew up in a middle-class family in Syracuse, New York. His father, Homer George Gere, worked as an insurance agent, and his mother, Doris, was a homemaker. From an early age, Richard displayed a natural talent for the arts, though it was music, not acting, that first captured his imagination. He became an accomplished trumpet player in high school, so skilled that he earned a gymnastics scholarship to the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where he initially majored in philosophy. Yet, the pull of performance was too strong, and before long, he abandoned the idea of a conventional academic path to pursue the stage. This leap of faith set him on the course that would eventually make him one of Hollywood's most enduring romantic leads. His acting career began on stage in the early 1970s, when he appeared in regional theater productions and soon landed roles on Broadway and in London's West End. He made a strong impression in the original London production of Grease, playing Danny Zuko, which gave him the confidence to transition into film. Gere's earliest screen appearances included small parts in Report to Commissioner, 1975, and Baby Blue Marine, 1976, but it wasn't until the late 1970s that he began to attract serious attention. His role in Looking for Mr. Goodbar, 1977, showcased him as a charismatic yet dangerous drifter opposite Diane Keaton. Soon after, Days of Heaven, 1978, directed by Terrence Malick, positioned Gere as more than just a pretty face. It revealed his ability to embody complex, brooding characters. The role that catapulted him into true stardom came in 1980 with American Gigolo. As Julian Kay, a high-end escort in Los Angeles, Gere embodied a suave and stylish masculinity that was both alluring and enigmatic. His performance not only turned him into a sex symbol, but also solidified his reputation as a leading man who could carry a film with charisma alone. The film's imagery, most memorably Gere carefully choosing suits from his closet while Blondie's Call Me plays, became iconic, and Richard Gere suddenly found himself as the face of a new kind of Hollywood stardom, polished, sensual, and modern. Just 2 years later, An Officer and a Gentleman in 1982 made Gere a household name around the world. Starring as Zach Mayo, a Navy aviation officer candidate, he delivered a performance that combined grit with vulnerability, cementing his image as the ultimate romantic hero. The film's unforgettable finale in which Gere's character sweeps Deborah Winger into his arms to the tune of Up Where We Belong, became one of the most celebrated romantic moments in cinema history. The role earned him critical acclaim and box office success, establishing him firmly among the top tier of Hollywood leading men. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Gere maintained this reputation. He was known for being suave and reserved in his personal life, a man who preferred quiet dignity over the loud excesses of Hollywood fame. Colleagues often described him as deeply professional on set, committed to his craft, and careful about the roles he chose. Unlike many stars of his era, he avoided typecasting by alternating between romances, thrillers, and dramas, showing versatility while still preserving his aura as the silver-haired gentleman of the screen. Beyond acting, Gere's personal life also attracted attention. He was linked romantically to several high-profile women, including model Cindy Crawford, whom he married in 1991. The marriage, though brief, placed Gere firmly in the spotlight as one half of a glamorous celebrity couple. Yet behind the headlines, Gere's true passions lay elsewhere. In the late 1970s, he had developed a deep interest in Buddhism, studying under the Dalai Lama and dedicating himself to meditation and humanitarian causes. His advocacy for Tibetan independence became a defining feature of his public image, even leading to tensions with the Chinese government and, at times, limiting his opportunities in Hollywood. Gere also became a prominent activist in the fight against HIV/AIDS, using his platform to raise awareness and funds during the height of the crisis. His philanthropic work extended across multiple causes, from homelessness to human rights, reflecting a man whose depth extended far beyond the characters he played on screen. By the time he stepped into his iconic role opposite Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman in 1990, Richard Gere had already established himself as more than just a matinee idol. He was a performer who embodied elegance and intelligence, a man whose off-screen principles gave his on-screen persona a weight that audiences respected. Over the decades, Richard Gere has remained not just a movie star, but a Hollywood gentleman in the truest sense, graceful, grounded, and guided by a commitment to something greater than fame. When audiences think of Pretty Woman today, they think of it as the ultimate modern-day Cinderella story, a romantic comedy that defined the 1990s and turned Julia Roberts and Richard Gere into one of Hollywood's most iconic screen duos. But the film's journey to the screen was anything but straightforward, and its final version was far lighter and more hopeful than what had first been envisioned. The original screenplay, written by J.F. Lawton, was titled 3000, a stark reference to the amount of money Vivian Ward, the central character, was paid for a week with wealthy businessman Edward Lewis. Far from being a feel-good romance, the script was a dark exploration of class, sex work, and the harsh realities of life on the streets of Los Angeles. In that version, Vivian was a drug addict, and the story ended on a far bleaker note. There was no fairy tale ending, no limousine ride into the sunset. Instead, it was a cautionary tale about the divide between wealth and survival, not a love story destined to melt audiences' hearts. It was only when the project shifted hands and fell under the vision of director Gary Marshall, known for his gift in balancing humor with heart, that the story began to transform. The studio, Touchstone Pictures, saw the potential for a romance rather than a tragedy. Marshall softened the edges, reshaping 3000 into Pretty Woman, a film that could charm audiences, while still giving a nod to the gritty circumstances of its characters. The tone shifted toward comedy and warmth, with Julia Roberts' Vivian no longer a cautionary figure, but a heroine who embodied strength, wit, and vulnerability. This decision would not only redefine the film, but also launch Roberts into stardom. Casting was crucial to the movie's success. At just 21 years old, Julia Roberts was a relative newcomer, with only a few significant credits to her name, including Mystic Pizza and Steel Magnolias. Many in Hollywood were skeptical that someone so young and relatively untested could carry a film of this scale. Yet Roberts' audition proved undeniable. Her magnetic smile, her natural humor, and her ability to make Vivian feel both relatable and radiant convinced the filmmakers she was the one. It was a gamble, but one that would pay off in ways no one could predicted. On the other side of the casting process was Richard Gere. By 1990, Gere was already a star, having made his name in films like American Gigolo and An Officer and a Gentleman. But he was hesitant about joining Pretty Woman. The role of Edward Lewis, a cold and calculating businessman who finds himself chained by love, didn't initially appeal to him. He wasn't sure if the script or the character were strong enough to justify his involvement. It took a moment of genuine charm from Roberts herself to change his mind. During a meeting to discuss the project, Gere was still undecided. Roberts, sensing his hesitation, scribbled a note and slid it across the table. It read simply, "Please say yes." Gere later recalled how much that small gesture meant to him, and he did say yes. That note sealed a partnership that would light up the screen. Once filming began, the chemistry between Roberts and Gere was undeniable. Their dynamic elevated the material far beyond what was on the page, and their natural rapport created moments of magic that have since become legendary. One of the most famous behind-the-scenes anecdotes comes from the necklace box scene. In it, Edward presents Vivian with a stunning necklace. As she reaches for it, Gere snaps the box shut, startling Roberts into a spontaneous laugh. That laugh was not scripted. It was Julia's real reaction to Gere's playful improvisation. Gary Marshall loved it so much he kept it in the film, and it became one of the most memorable moments in romantic comedy history. Another iconic scene came when Gere, who was a skilled pianist in real life, played the piano in a hotel lobby late at night, while Roberts danced barefoot on the furniture. That intimate, unscripted energy between them gave the film its spark. Their relationship on set was professional, but their mutual respect and willingness to support each other's instincts made their performances resonate. Gere brought a sense of sophistication and quiet steadiness to Edward, while Roberts infused Vivian with warmth, humor, and resilience. Together, they turned what might have been a simple love story into something timeless. When Pretty Woman was released in 1990, it defied expectations. Critics were divided. Some thought it was a formulaic romantic comedy, while others praised the charm of its leads. But audiences embraced it wholeheartedly. The film became a massive box office hit, grossing over $460 million worldwide, making it one of the highest-grossing romantic comedies of all time. Julia Roberts earned a Golden Globe for her performance and an Academy Award nomination, and Richard Gere's career was revitalized with a role that showed his softer, romantic side. Beyond the numbers, though, the film redefined what a modern fairy tale could look like. It presented a story where love could transcend class divides, where a woman who had been dismissed and underestimated could become the heroine of her own story. Robert's Vivian wasn't a passive princess waiting to be saved. She was witty, sharp, and unapologetically herself. Gere's Edward wasn't just a rescuer. He was a man who needed rescuing in his own way, learning humanity and warmth through love. Pretty Woman became more than a movie. It became a cultural phenomenon. It launched Julia Roberts as America's sweetheart. It cemented Richard Gere as Hollywood's gentleman, and it left behind a legacy of laughter, romance, and unforgettable moments that continue to charm audiences decades later. When Julia Roberts and Richard Gere first came together on the set of Pretty Woman, it was clear to everyone around them that something special was happening. Crew members who worked closely on the film have often described their chemistry as instant and effortless, the kind of connection that can't be manufactured by a director or written into a script. Roberts was just 21, stepping into the biggest role of her career, while Gere was already a seasoned actor with years of experience behind him. Yet there was no imbalance, no sense of one overshadowing the other. Instead, what unfolded was a natural rhythm between them, as though they had been working together for years. Their comfort and ease in each other's presence didn't just make filming smoother. It translated directly onto the screen, creating a moment of authenticity that audiences around the world would never forget. Roberts herself has spoken openly about the way Gere made her feel during that time. She once called him her knight in shining armor, a phrase that perfectly captured how safe and supported she felt working alongside him. For a young actress suddenly thrust into the global spotlight, that reassurance was invaluable. Gere, with his calm demeanor and steady professionalism, gave her space to shine without ever trying to steal it. He wasn't simply her co-star. He was her partner in every sense of the word while the cameras were rolling. Gere, for his part, never held back in his admiration for Roberts. He praised her ability to bring light and honesty into every scene, often remarking that her authenticity was what made Pretty Woman the phenomenon it became. He acknowledged that while the script was charming, it was Julia's energy, her laughter, her natural warmth, her ability to inhabit Vivian with both vulnerability and strength, that lifted the story into something magical. For Gere, Roberts wasn't just a talented young actress. She was a force who transformed every frame she was in. What made their relationship so fascinating was that it was purely professional, yet deeply affectionate. There was never any romantic involvement between them off-screen, but their bond was built on trust and respect. They enjoyed each other's company, encouraged one another, and shared a playfulness that lightened the long hours of filming. The now famous necklace box snap moment, for example, wasn't just a bit of improvisation. It was a glimpse into the genuine dynamic between them. Gere teasing, Roberts laughing, both of them fully alive in the moment. Their ability to keep the atmosphere joyful behind the scenes became one of the reasons the film itself felt so effortless. This unique connection shaped how audiences perceived them long after credits rolled. Fans were captivated by the possibility that the love story they saw on screen might have carried over into real life. People wanted them to be a couple, to fulfill the fantasy beyond the confines of the movie. Tabloids speculated, fans hoped, and interviewers often pressed them on the subject. Yet both Roberts and Gere were clear. Theirs was a friendship, not a romance. Still, the affection they displayed for one another made it easy to understand why people believed otherwise. Their bond endured long after Pretty Woman. Nearly a decade later, when they reunited for Runaway Bride in 1999, the same magic was still there. By then, Roberts was an established star and Gere was an elder statesman of Hollywood, yet their dynamic hadn't changed. They slipped back into their roles with the ease of old friends, reminding audiences once again of the rare chemistry they shared. It was proof that what they had wasn't a one-time spark. It was a genuine connection that could withstand time and distance. The Roberts-Gere partnership remains one of the most celebrated in Hollywood history, precisely because it combined the best of both worlds. The fantasy of a great love story and the reality of a great friendship. Their on-screen chemistry gave us two unforgettable films, while their off-screen respect and affection gave those films a depth that no script could have delivered on its own. For audiences, the bond between Julia Roberts and Richard Gere was more than acting. It was a reminder that sometimes the most enduring relationships in Hollywood aren't romances at all, but friendships built on trust, admiration, and a little bit of magic. Nearly a decade after Pretty Woman made Julia Roberts and Richard Gere Hollywood royalty, fate brought them back together in 1999 for another romantic comedy under the direction of Gary Marshall. The film was Runaway Bride, a light-hearted story that seemed tailor-made to showcase their undeniable chemistry once again. This time, Roberts played Maggie Carpenter, a woman with a reputation for leaving grooms at the altar, while Gere took on the role of Ike Graham, a cynical journalist sent to cover her story. The setup was pure rom-com magic, a woman terrified of commitment, a man skeptical of love, and inevitable sparks that fly when they collide. The plot gave Roberts plenty of room to play with her trademark charm. Maggie was quirky, unpredictable, and filled with the kind of contradictions that made her both frustrating and lovable. Gere's Ike, on the other hand, was steady, sharp, and quietly amused by the chaos she created. The film leaned into the dynamic that had worked so well in Pretty Woman. Gere as the calm, grounding presence, and Roberts as the whirlwind of warmth and spontaneity. Together, they once again created a romance that felt authentic, even when the situations around them veered into the fantastical. Behind the scenes, the experience was just as joyful as audiences might have imagined. After nearly 10 years apart, both actors found that their rapport hadn't dimmed in the slightest. They slipped back into working together with ease, and the crew often remarked on how natural it was to see them side by side again. Roberts later admitted that she felt instantly comfortable the moment she began filming with Gere, as if no time had passed at all. Gere himself described the reunion in simple, heartfelt terms. It was like slipping into old shoes, perfectly comfortable. That sense of ease radiates through the film, giving their interactions a warmth that no script could have manufactured. There were plenty of playful moments during filming that highlighted their bond. Marshall, who had directed them in Pretty Woman, knew exactly how to capture the best of their chemistry. He often encouraged improvisation, trusting that Roberts and Gere could find the humor and tenderness in their own rhythms. Just as in their first collaboration, small unscripted touches added authenticity to their performances. Their laughter on set was real, their teasing genuine, and their affection unmistakable. It was less like two superstars working together for the sake of box office numbers, and more like old friends rediscovering a rhythm that had never really gone away. When Runaway Bride was released in the summer of 1999, expectations were sky high. Audiences were eager to see Roberts and Gere together again, and while critics were divided on the film's predictability, fans showed up in droves. The movie grossed over $300 million worldwide, making it one of the year's biggest romantic comedies. Though it didn't reach the cultural phenomenon status of Pretty Woman, it was undeniably a commercial success and proved that the Roberts-Gere pairing still held incredible power. More importantly, Runaway Bride cemented their legacy as one of Hollywood's great screen duos. Few pairings managed to capture lightning in a bottle twice, yet Roberts and Gere did exactly that. Their reunion didn't feel forced or contrived. It felt like the natural continuation of a story audiences have been longing to revisit. The public may not have gotten a real-life romance between them, but what they did receive was just as satisfying, a second chance to witness the magic of their partnership. In the end, Runaway Bride wasn't just another romantic comedy. It was proof of the rare and lasting bond between Julia Roberts and Richard Gere, a bond that transcended time and trends. The film gave audiences another chance to believe in love stories, and even though it didn't redefine the genre the way Pretty Woman had, it reminded everyone why these two stars together were so special. With Gary Marshall guiding them once again, Roberts and Gere showed that some connections don't fade, they only grow stronger with time. After the whirlwind success of Pretty Woman and later Runaway Bride, Julia Roberts and Richard Gere each took their own distinct paths that showcased their talents in very different ways while also revealing who they were beyond the Hollywood spotlight. For Roberts, superstardom was only the beginning. The 1990s had already established her as America's sweetheart, but in 2000 she proved that her appeal went far deeper than charm and charisma. That year she starred in Erin Brockovich, a gritty drama based on a true story of a single mother who took on a powerful energy company accused of polluting a small town's water supply. Roberts transformed herself for the role, leaving behind glamorous costumes from miniskirts and boots, and embodying a character full of grit, fire, and heart. Her performance was nothing short of electric, and it earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress. With that win, she silenced any doubts that she was merely a romantic comedy star. She had become one of Hollywood's most versatile and commanding performers. Yet while Roberts thrived professionally, she also made deliberate choices to prioritize her personal life. In 2002, she married cinematographer Daniel Moder, whom she met on the set of The Mexican. The two went on to raise 3 children together, largely away from the Hollywood spotlight. Unlike many of her contemporaries, Roberts valued privacy, choosing a quieter family life in New Mexico over the constant glare of Los Angeles. At the same time, she lent her influence to philanthropic causes, supporting UNICEF and other humanitarian organizations. Her life beyond the screen wasn't about chasing fame. It was about balance, proving that even the biggest star in the world could step back and simply live. Richard Gere, meanwhile, moved in a different direction. Though he continued to act in romantic comedies and dramas throughout the late 90s, he transitioned in the 2000s to roles that reflected his maturity and depth as a performer. One of his most celebrated performances came in the 2002 musical Chicago, where he played the flashy lawyer Billy Flynn. The role earned him a Golden Globe Award and reminded audiences that he was far more versatile than the suave romantic archetype he had become known for. Later, films like Arbitrage 2012 showcased him as a morally complex businessman, earning him widespread critical praise. Gere seemed less concerned with box office numbers and more interested in projects that challenge him artistically. Outside of acting, Gere devoted much of his energy to activism. A practicing Buddhist, he became one of Hollywood's most vocal advocates for Tibetan independence, often used his fame to bring attention to human rights issues. His commitment to these causes was so strong that it sometimes affected his career, most notably when his outspoken support for Tibet made him a controversial figure in China, limiting the distribution of some of his films. Still, Gere remained steadfast, believing that his platform was meant to be used for more than just entertainment. His work with humanitarian organizations and his public presence as an advocate added layers to his legacy that went far beyond the screen. As the years went by, the public images of Roberts and Gere diverged. Roberts remained firmly within the Hollywood orbit, her name still attached to major films and projects, and her presence still commanding red carpets and interviews. She was the enduring symbol of Hollywood royalty, the actress who had once captured the world with her smile, and who continued to prove her relevance decade after decade. Gere, in contrast, chose a quieter path. He never stopped working, but he became more selective, less interested in maintaining superstardom, and more invested in using his influence responsibly. He cultivated respect rather than constant visibility. Together, their journeys tell two different but equally compelling stories of life beyond the screen. Roberts embodied the balance between fame and family, using her power in Hollywood, while also carving out a private sanctuary for herself and her loved ones. Gere embodied the artist-activist, someone who leveraged his celebrity to champion causes greater than himself. Both paths reflect a desire for authenticity, whether in personal relationships or in global advocacy, and both have ensured that Roberts and Gere remain not just remembered for their roles together, but admired for the lives they built apart. When Julia Roberts turned 57 in 2024, the milestone gave her an opportunity to reflect on a career that had spanned more than 3 decades and on the people who've been a part of it. In interviews marking the occasion, Roberts spoke with warmth and honesty, often circling back to the projects that defined her and the relationships that sustained her. Among those, one film always seemed to rise to the top of her memories: Pretty Woman. Even after all the success that followed, her Oscar win, her evolution into one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood, her enduring reputation as America's sweetheart, it was this modern-day Cinderella story and her partnership with Richard Gere that she described as one of the great turning points of her life. For Roberts, Pretty Woman wasn't just another film role. It was the moment she went from a promising young actress to a global icon. She has often spoken about how much the film meant to her personally, but when she turned 57, her reflections carried an added layer of gratitude. She credited not only the magic of the story or the brilliance of director Gary Marshall, but also the gift of working alongside Richard Gere. She described him as someone who made the entire experience not only bearable but joyful. Working with Richard was safe, fun, and deeply trusting, she said. Those 3 words, safe, fun, trusting, sum up the bond they share behind the scenes, a bond that shaped both the movie itself and her own sense of what it meant to be part of true creative partnership. One of the things Roberts emphasized was that their connection was never about romance, despite what so many audiences and tabloids wanted to believe. Instead, it was about respect and genuine friendship. She revealed that behind the laughter and the sparkling chemistry on screen, what she valued most was the sense of partnership Gere gave her. As a young actress at the time, Roberts was still finding her footing, and the enormity of leading such a major studio film could have been overwhelming. Gere's presence, steady and generous, gave her the confidence to take risks, to laugh freely, and to embrace the vulnerability the role demanded. She remembered how Gere had a gift for keeping the mood light. Whether it was improvising lines, cracking a joke, or playfully teasing her in ways that would later find their way into the film, he made the set feel less like a pressure cooker and more like a playground. The most famous example, of course, was the unscripted jewelry box snap gag, which startled Roberts into delivering the unfiltered, infectious laugh that became one of the film's most iconic moments. But it wasn't just that single instance. Roberts revealed that moments like those happened constantly, little gestures and improvisations that reminded her that Gere wasn't just a co-star, but a collaborator who wanted her to shine as brightly as possible. Even years later, when they reunited for Runaway Bride, the same dynamic was there. Roberts noted that she didn't have to work to reconnect with Gere. The friendship was intact, waiting for them to pick it up again. And now, looking back at 57, she said what she cherished most about that bond was its durability. Unlike so many Hollywood relationships, whether romantic or platonic, theirs had never been complicated by scandal or tabloid drama. It was built on mutual admiration, on the simple joy of working together, and on a kind of friendship that didn't need to exist in the public eye to remain strong. What struck Roberts, reflecting on all of this, was how rare that kind of relationship is in Hollywood. She had seen plenty of friendships and partnerships fade under the strain of fame, but hers with Gere had endured for more than 3 decades. They didn't need constant headlines to remind people of their connection. The films they made together spoke for themselves. And yet, behind those films was something far more meaningful. The memory of laughter between takes, the feeling of being supported when the cameras weren't rolling, and the knowledge that their friendship had lasted without ever being defined by rumors or speculation. At 57, Roberts' reflections weren't just about nostalgia. They were about gratitude for the career that had given her so much, for the family life she had built with her husband Daniel Moder and their children, and for the friendships that had carried her through it all. But when she spoke about Richard Gere, there was a special glint of fondness, not the fondness of unspoken romance, but of something more enduring, the joy of knowing that some bonds, born in the middle of movie-making chaos, can last a lifetime. For fans, hearing Roberts open up about this was both surprising and deeply satisfying. It offered a glimpse behind the curtain of one of Hollywood's most beloved pairings, revealing that the magic they created wasn't the product of gossip or fantasy, but of something far simpler and perhaps even more powerful: genuine friendship. In an industry often defined by fleeting connections, Roberts and Gere had managed to create something timeless, and that, as she turned 57, was what she celebrated most. Even after decades have passed, the legacy of Julia Roberts and Richard Gere remains firmly etched in Hollywood history. At the heart of that legacy is Pretty Woman, a film that redefined the romantic comedy genre and continues to resonate with audiences around the world. Released in 1990, the movie was more than a box office success. It became a cultural touchstone, a modern fairy tale that blended humor, romance, and just enough grit to feel real. Its enduring popularity proves that some stories never lose their magic, and at the center of it all were Roberts and Gere. For Julia Roberts, the role of Vivian Ward turned her into a household name, and ultimately a symbol of strength wrapped in charm. Unlike the damsels in distress of older Hollywood films, Vivian had agency, wit, and resilience. Roberts infused her with warmth and relatability, creating a character who wasn't just loved by Edward Lewis, but by millions of moviegoers who saw themselves in her struggles and triumphs. That performance paved the way for more complex female leads in romantic comedies, and showed that audiences were eager for women who were more than just accessories to the story. Roberts' career soared from that point forward, and her image as America's sweetheart was forever linked to the woman who dared to dream bigger than her circumstances. Richard Gere, on the other hand, solidified his place as Hollywood's quintessential gentleman. Edward Lewis wasn't simply a wealthy businessman who swept Vivian off her feet. He was a character whose growth came from vulnerability, kindness, and openness to change. Gere's portrayal gave depth to a role that could have easily been flat, turning Edward into the dream partner many still measure romantic leads against today. His elegance, quiet confidence, and the subtle humor he brought to the character reinforced his image as a leading man who embodied sophistication while still being approachable. Together, Roberts and Gere created an on-screen partnership that felt both timeless and rare. Their chemistry was effortless, their trust in one another obvious, and their performances together lifted Pretty Woman from a simple romantic comedy into a cultural phenomenon. That bond carried over into Runaway Bride years later, proving that what they had wasn't a fluke, but something genuine and lasting. In an industry where most on-screen pairings fade into memory, theirs has remained iconic, often ranked alongside the greatest duos in film history. Even now, fans hold on to hope of seeing Roberts and Gere reunite once more. Interviews and fan discussions often circle back to the idea of a third collaboration, another chance to witness the magic they created together. Yet both actors have gracefully moved into new phases of their lives and careers. Roberts has embraced selective roles while focusing on her family and philanthropic work, while Gere has shifted toward independent projects and dedicated himself to activism and humanitarian causes. They may not share the screen again, but their bond continues to live in the films they left behind. The true legacy of Roberts and Gere isn't just about the movies. It's about the feelings those movies created. Pretty Woman gave audiences permission to believe in fairy tales in a modern world, while Runaway Bride reminded them that second chances are possible. More than 30 years later, these films are still watched, quoted, and loved, proving that the magic of Roberts and Gere endures. They remain, to this day, one of cinema's most cherished duos, forever reminding us of the power of chemistry, trust, and the simple joy of watching two people light up the screen together. As Julia Roberts and Richard Gere's story comes full circle, what stands out most is not scandal or secret romances, but something far rarer in Hollywood: a friendship built on trust, respect, and genuine joy in each other's company. Their bond is living proof that the real magic of cinema doesn't always come from off-screen love affairs. It comes from the trust two actors place in one another, the willingness to play, to laugh, and to make each other better every single day on set. When Roberts turned 57, she looked back on a career defined not by controversy, but by gratitude. Gratitude for the directors who believed in her, for the audiences who adored her, and for co-stars like Richard Gere, who made her feel safe and supported when the spotlight could have been overwhelming. For her, Pretty Woman wasn't just a breakout role, and Runaway Bride wasn't just a reunion. It was the experience of working alongside someone who brought out the very best in her. Gere, in turn, has never been shy about praising Roberts, crediting her warmth, authenticity, and sense of fun for making their collaborations unforgettable. The real behind-the-scenes story isn't one of secret affairs or hidden drama, but of laughter between takes, of playful improvisations that turned into iconic moments, and a bond that endured long after the cameras stopped rolling. It's about the little gestures, the snap of a jewelry box lid, a shared smile, an improvised line, that transformed ordinary scenes into movie magic. Those moments weren't scripted. They were born out of trust, and it is that trust that has kept their friendship alive for more than 3 decades. For audiences, Roberts and Gere will always be remembered as one of Hollywood's greatest on-screen couples. They gave us a modern fairy tale in Pretty Woman, a second chance at love in Runaway Bride, and countless memories that continue to inspire fans around the world. But for Roberts and Gere themselves, the legacy is simpler and far more meaningful. A partnership built on kindness, admiration, and the kind of friendship that doesn't fade with time. Sometimes, the greatest love stories are the ones lived on screen. And sometimes, the greatest gift Hollywood can give us is a friendship like theirs, one that lasts quietly, respectfully, and beautifully off it.